Good evening, everyone. Hello, my wonderful humans. It's good to see you. It's been a long while since we've done a stream, so it's really good to be here. Welcome back to Restitching the Tapestry. We are at episode 78, I believe, which is like, I still cannot believe that we are at episode 78. So, you might notice a new face here with me this evening. Welcome to my dear friend Heather Kanicki. Hello, darling. How are you?
Hello. I'm a little nervous, but very excited at the same time. So if I trip over my own words tonight, I do apologize.
Nervous, not you are a natural born teacher and speaker. I am totally confident. Totally confident. So we'll talk a little bit more here about like our history in just a moment, but I do want to see who's tuned in so far. So we have Arpy here, and Arpy says, Happy Pride Month. Happy Pride Month, Arpy. It's great to see
Yay!
you. Leo says, Hello, humans. And human, I'm insulted. I know sometimes I don't want to be referred to as a human either, especially on the days where I'm feeling particularly dismal over the state of the human world, which we will also be talking about the dystopian hellhole that we're currently experiencing too in just a moment. So,
Don't be
but
helpful.
we'll, we'll get to that in just a few minutes. So, oh my gosh. So, Heather, well, first and foremost, we met when I got hired in at our places of work where
Yep.
where I teach and where you used to teach, but you still work in an administrative capacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ever since we kind of like met each other, we kind of just really gravitated toward one another,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it like to me, like, and I know we were just talking about this in the back room, it does not feel like that life existed before our friendship started. Like
Yeah.
we keep thinking we're like, it's only been it's been 6 years,
Yep.
which seems like a pretty good stint, right?
Right. Right.
But it also feels like it's been like 600
Yeah.
years.
Basically, it's only been 6 years, but oh, it's been 6 years. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So can you describe what it was like from your perspective, like when we were like meeting for the first time? Mostly
Well,
because I'm just curious.
I think I think we met at a meeting, didn't we? Was that did someone say the back rooms? Sorry. I got the chat up too. I should have did that. Um,
Leo.
but yeah, I think didn't we meet at a first time at a meeting?
I think it was like an well, no, it wasn't an orientation. No, it was like no, it's that yearly orientation that was done.
Yes, that way was the orientation that
Like the
would
adjunct
never end.
faculty. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then like and that's how we met because I noticed you like sitting at a different table and for some reason I
Mhm.
was sitting with the wrong department because I was a newbie and didn't know what I was doing. And I saw you and I was just like, she looks like someone I need to know. I need to get to know. Like
Yeah. You see, you saw me before I saw you, and then to be
I
honest,
don't know how you didn't see me. I looked like I rode it on a unicorn.
sorry, I didn't notice the unicorn. I mean, I must have been so engrossed in trying to pay attention to the meeting and not falling asleep that, you know,
It
but
must have
yeah,
been very engaging.
aren't they usually? Especially
No.
those meetings that could just really be an email. Just get a pen,
Yeah, that is a good point. That
Yeah.
is a very
Yeah.
good point. Yeah, like I'm trying to remember like did I approach you at the meeting or
Honestly, I don't remember. I really don't, which is funny because and maybe that's why it kind of feels like you've just always been there. Like I can remember, the day I met my husband. I can remember the day I met my, childhood best friend who also has the same first name as me. So shout out to her if she's watching. But I mean, I honestly do not remember our first meeting. I don't.
Yeah,
But I
like
do remember sharing office hours, which I think is where we really started getting close.
right.
So that I
I
remember.
think it was like a series of things because like
Yeah.
just for context, everyone, when you are adjunct faculty at higher in a higher education place, like you're hopping usually from one institution to another, meeting so
Yeah.
many different people, cohabitating in offices with different people. Well, maybe
Mhm.
not cohabitating, but it always felt like we lived in there. Um,
Yeah,
but that's
absolutely.
kind of like, yeah, like I think cumulatively, that's how we met and how we started to get to know each other. So,
Right, and I think the fact that we were teaching the same subjects and we would just kind of bounce ideas off of each other for, "I'm really struggling with this assignment. I can't think of a better way of doing it," that kind of thing. I think that really is where we first started to, connect.
right. And additionally, I think, well, the fact that we also got to do so many cool things, we got to team teach together.
Mhm.
We got to, like, we've written together.
Yep.
Like, Heather, everyone, is a published author, by the way. Shameless plug for your work. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for the shameless plug. So yeah, I have a trilogy of fantasy novels called the Clandestine series, available on Amazon.com. But I also have a book of poetry called The Airless Door, which plug back to you, honey, because I mean, you're the one who got me back into writing poetry. I mean, I had a very horrible experience writing poetry in 10th grade. I had to write one of the classroom assignment, the generic, write a poem about something. And you had to make sure it fit into iambic pentameter and it had to rhyme every other line. And there were all of these like big time constraints. I hated it. It was a
Oh,
horrible
yeah.
experience. So then I very quickly put my quill down and went back to writing about demons and wizards and stuff like that and fantasy. And yeah, and then you took me to a poetry reading at a local coffee shop, and it was just so amazing to hear people's stories written in prose, or excuse me, written in verse versus prose. It was amazing, and I went home and I penned my first poem that I had written since 10th grade. So I mean, just thank you for getting me back into it. So
Oh, honey. Well, I'm glad that I could help with that. And well, and the truth is, like, I knew you were a talented writer. So being able to see you kind of derive confidence from that, like, and I kind of think that we've done that, for each other too. Like, we've kind of imbued each other with confidence. And I can say the same with Ari, by the way, who just says, yay in the chat.
oh,
Hi, Ari.
hi.
It's good to see you. Like, I think for those of us who are writing friends, like we are each other's biggest fans, and
Mhm.
I think we have to be because, like,
Oh,
in a
yeah.
world where writing is, devalued, much like the rest of the arts, like, we kind of, like, have to be our own little cheerleaders to be like, "Woohoo, Heather, go, woo, ready, okay."
Woo, rah, 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 sis, boom, bah.
My cheerleader impression is terrible, so
I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, you should
thank
be a
you.
cheerleader for Halloween. You'd be an amazing cheerleader. You have
Well, maybe I will, I don't know, like, my partner and I already talked about being drag queens for Halloween.
Oh, that would be
Yeah,
awesome.
we're gonna create, like, our own, like, drag personas, so I'm really excited about that. Although
Oh,
it will mean that I will have to shave again. It'll be like a repeat of when he and I were Velma and Daphne
which is
from
that
Scooby-Doo.
was those were the most amazing Halloween costumes I have ever seen in my life, and I love Halloween.
I
Halloween is like
was
my holiday. Love it.
not gonna lie, I was pretty proud of how I pulled off Velma, like, I'm curvy, I got glasses, the wig I had was on point. I wore a push-up bra for that too,
Did you
so
really? I didn't
I
know that.
did. It
Oh
was
my
so
gosh.
uncomfortable.
Yeah,
It was like a
welcome to the
size
girl
too
world.
small because apparently I'm a little busty. So
Well, welcome to the world of push-up bras. Yeah, suck.
well, it was a
Yeah.
rude awakening for me. Okay. So before we get to talking about tonight's topic, we're going to go over. I'm sorry, I just got Leo's comment. Jinkies.
Love it.
Of course, nothing compares to the original Velma. So, but anyway, per the usual, well, while I'm going through this as well, if any of you in the chat want to let us know how you're doing, feel free to let us know, because for some of you, we've not spoken in a while. So let me know how you're doing. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go over our show's mission statement. Okay. So we live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the adversity many marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to make connections and have challenging conversations about social topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing.
Gives me
So,
goosebumps. It just does.
oh,
Goosebumps.
oh, Leo's like, I hope somebody is doing praying hands. So one of like Ari's trademarks is they whenever I'm doing the mission statement, they're always like, we all kind of have like our little quirks that we do. I just vogue gaily all the time. So that's my trademark. Not the most original thing, but hey, it's something. And thank you. I appreciate that you are impressed by the mission statement and how it sounds. This is me trying to be fabulous, and I literally looked like I was cracking my neck.
Honey, you don't have to try to look fabulous because you are.
Oh, thank you. So let's talk about some current events. First and foremost, happy Pride Month, everybody. Isn't it like it's hard to believe that, it's June already and that we are in Pride Month? I'm really excited. I do have some plans here on my YouTube channel over the course of Pride Month, so stay tuned for that. I'm also thinking about maybe doing a poetry reading on my poetry channel. Going because in my second book, I have like those series of queer confession poems. I think I might do a reading focusing just on those. So we'll see what happens. For Pride Month, I also, if you tune in on Saturday, which is tomorrow, wait, no, it's not tomorrow. It's the day after tomorrow. If you tune in on the podcast Between the Lines, which is here on YouTube, I had the honor of being invited to speak during a LGBTQ plus literary panel, which it was such a great conversation. I hope that you all will go check out Between the Lines and go listen to that. That was really fun. Beyond that, I am just vibing for Pride. Later in the month, Heather and I are going to have a conversation about the commercialization of Pride. So we're going to have some good chat about that. So, oh, what a rhyme. A good chat about that. So, so you're like pretty new to Pride Month, Heather, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am. I was first introduced to it, and I know we'll probably talk about this in commercialization of Pride, that episode, but yeah, I was first introduced to it when I was walking through the library at one of the places that I worked. I never heard of Pride Month, and I saw these, flags and these displays of people, LGBT. I can't talk.
LGBTQ plus.
Thank you.
It can be a mouthful sometimes.
Yeah. And so I saw displays by authors of the community, and like they had little pictures of their stories and stuff like that too, like in synopses of their lives and little bios and stuff. It was really it was cool. It was extremely cool to see. And so yeah, that was my first introduction to it. So but I'm actually going to be celebrating Pride Month too, even though I'm cisgender. I'm very much an ally. I'm going to be going to a Pride festival that's going to be in my hometown. I want to say it's like mid to late June.
Yeah, I think it was mid-June if
Mid-June, yeah,
memory
so
serves me
I'm very
correctly,
excited
yeah.
about that, so, yeah.
That's so exciting,
Be my
and you know
first
what?
Pride festival.
Well, and see, the thing is, like, and I know we'll talk about this more for commercialization of Pride too, but, um, Pride, I think, is just as much for allies as it is for us. It's meant to be inviting and inclusive, and the thing is, like, we need allies. Like, allies help us, um, they help us advocate. They help us, by raising their voices with us, So thank you for all that you do as an ally. I really
Aw.
appreciate it.
Mhm.
Mm.
Mm.
So in less good news, it's actually really bad.
Yeah,
I know that the last video I made a few days ago was about the shooting in Texas, at Robb Elementary, and we wanted to take a moment, like we normally do when current events happen. We wanted to take a moment to talk about that. Of course, there were, I think last I recall, like it was the 19 children were killed and 2 adults were killed. And what's alarming is that there's been a number of shootings that have happened since that shooting. If I remember correctly, 17 shootings have
yeah,
happened.
I think it's like 17, yeah.
Yeah, and the president, if I did he already make a statement, I think?
Yeah, just before our show started, President Biden did a 30-minute, speech from the White House, where he talked about, basically saying enough is enough.
Yeah,
He has he's working with Congress. They're talking about reinstating a policy that he helped write in the 90s. It started in 1994, where it banned assault rifles, just totally banned them. And then in 2004, because apparently this policy was only good for 10 years, the policy ended and it hasn't been reinstated since. And he was talking about in his speech how, unfortunately, since the ban has been lifted, that the number of shootings has just gone.
skyrocketed.
It's skyrocketed. It's just, yeah. Now he did stress he is not taking away guns
Right.
from law-abiding citizens. He is not doing that. What he wants, though, is more stringent background checks. He is talking about where if Congress doesn't approve of going back to that old law, that old policy, he said that he thinks that we should raise it from 18 years to 21 years in order
Right,
to
yeah.
purchase assault rifles. He also wants to limit the number of rounds in a clip because apparently you can have at least 30 bullets in a clip. So you can very quickly murder quite a few people, with just
Yeah.
one clip.
It's really unsettling, and the truth of the matter is, like, yeah, like, the big thing that I hear people say is that, "Well, you're never gonna completely curb gun violence," and I think we know that,
Right.
right? Like, we know that even, like, going as far as, like, banning, like, that's not gonna solve the problem
No,
necessarily, but as
no.
long as we can take measures and improve things
Mhm.
that, like, some basic common sense things that aren't even in place, that
Right,
has the potential of making things so much better. So
right.
checking out the chat really quick. Hi, Kaishana. Kaishana's here. It's good to see you. And Ari confirms the calling for the assault weapons ban. I 100% agree. I think that. Oh, and Ari says that they're behind. I wonder if there's like a little lag on YouTube tonight. And yes, Kaishana, I 100% agree. We need to educate people on how to properly use guns, which includes storing them
Yep.
and all of that
Mhm.
jazz.
Well,
Because,
Oh, I'm sorry, go
Oh, no,
ahead.
you go ahead, hon.
I was just gonna say, he also mentioned that he wants to close loopholes. Apparently, there is a loophole that I didn't know about this loophole, that you can buy currently assault weapons either online or at gun shows, and you do not have to wait for a background check of any kind
Mhm.
because of how that processes works. But if you go to an actual gun store, then you would fill out the paperwork and do the background
Yeah.
check. However, sometimes what'll happen is there's another loophole. It's the 3-day loophole where if you this is the part I didn't quite understand, and if anybody in the chat who watched it and understood it would appreciate some clarification. Something about how if the assault rifle, you have 3 days and where you can go pick up your gun, if the but even if your background check isn't done, like three
Yeah, so
days.
there's, like, that crucial window where a person
Yeah,
could do anything, right?
exactly.
Before that info is available, which is well, and adding on to that too, one of the big issues is that there are inconsistent gun laws from state to state. Like,
Exactly.
one state might have very rigorous laws, other states may have 0, right?
Yeah.
So, and then there comes, like, the complication of, like, crossing state lines, what does that do? So, like, there's just so much inconsistency.
Yeah.
Whereas if we look at like the regulation of vehicles, right, which can be weaponized, unfortunately,
Yep.
like the that is it's so much more rigorous, like, and it's
Mhm.
more universally rigorous as
Right.
well. And then yeah, Ari confirms that that's true. If you don't hear back from the background check, no matter what, you can purchase a weapon.
Thanks, hon, 'cause yeah,
Yeah,
I wasn't 100% sure, so thanks for clearing that up.
yeah. And I agree, Kaishana, as well. Like, people who own guns should have a mandatory gun background check every. Like, I do think that it should be a consistent thing.
that's
Now,
brilliant.
people may disagree with me on this as well, but I do think that there should be more like assessment-based things as well. Like, I know, like, in some states, like, people have to take like a test or whatever, but I
Mhm,
do think that that should be something that's consistent as well.
mhm.
Let's see. Leo says it's happening because conservatives think the written law is more important than the spirit of the law. Interesting. Oh, and Kaishana agrees on the age of being 21 and older for
Mhm,
gun ownership. Yeah.
mhm.
So yeah, we just wanted to touch on that
Yeah,
because like I don't know, like we see like a lot of rhetoric being thrown around where politicians are saying to arm teachers and stuff like that. And when you think about it, like with how devalued teachers already are, like how can that really be placed on them as
yeah,
well on top of all of that? So
yeah.
but we're gonna keep this topic in the back of our minds, and we're gonna keep you updated on it from what we find out as well.
Mhm.
But we're gonna
Yeah,
hope that things finally happen, that there
yeah,
is actually momentum, even though we've been saying this for like what 20 years. So
yeah. And just to say, if anybody from that, that has suffered from the gun violence of the last, well, the last 17 instances,
yeah,
heart goes out to you. You are loved. You know, we're thinking of you for sure.
we are. Kaishana, actually, we're about to talk about that. So our topic tonight is whether or not print media is dead. I know it's a drastic change from what we were just talking
Yeah.
about, um, but so being that Heather and I are writers, and Ari is a writer as well, like we thought that it'd be really interesting for us to talk about this topic, considering it's something that we have like connected with so much. And yes, Kaishana, like newspapers, books, magazines, etc.
Mhm.
Um, oh, and RB, I'm sorry to see that or hear about that you've had bomb threats at your college the
Oh,
past 2
no.
weeks. That's scary.
It is.
That's really scary. But like we've wanted to talk about this topic for a while because, well, I mean, a lot of people have been arguing over the past few years that print media is kind of falling by the wayside a little bit. So let's talk about something a little bit more personal first. Like, how do we like to read? Print or digital? Heather, ready, go. How do you like to
Digital.
read?
I'm sorry. I can't do digital. I can't. Give me a good old fashioned book I can hold in my hands. My reason for that is my job. I sit at a computer for 8 hours a day doing paperwork, writing reports, answering emails. It's a very digital focused job. When I want to read, I mean, I want to have that relaxation. I could kick my feet up, and not that you can't kick your feet up with your laptop and your,
Well,
read from
yeah,
that, but
yeah.
or even your cell phone. But I want a book in my hand. And I'm actually still that way too for even some work stuff. Like I have to do a lot of research and journal articles and things like that for my job. So I will actually, if whenever possible, I will print it off so I can still highlight. I'm old school. Highlight, underline, make notes in the
Oh,
margins.
yeah. Annotating, I love doing
Yeah.
that
Oh, I
too.
have to.
Then
I
again,
will
we're
not remember
teachers.
it.
Of course, we love doing that.
Yeah, exactly. I won't remember. I will not remember what I read unless I do that. And it's funny you say that because when I was still teaching, yes, the students would email me their stuff, but I would print it off and do handwritten comments unless I absolutely had to do, like use Microsoft Word, for example, and use the comments on the side.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, for sure.
Give me a book.
So for me, okay, it depends on what kind of reading I'm doing. Of course, I have stipulations. So if it's like, I don't know, like I do prefer digital most of the time, especially when it comes to teaching. I prefer digital because I just think that the tools, the interfaces, I think that they are more time efficient and interactive and easy to use. And I feel like I'm able to generate more like feedback depending on the situation.
Mhm.
I also just enjoy the ability to like be reading something but have access to other information
Mhm.
at my disposal quickly. Can be a downfall. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. Um, but I do love reading a book. Like when I'm reading a book, I like to be able to hold it. I love being
Mhm.
able to put a bookmark in. I
Yep.
love being able to like put the bookmark in the book and follow line by line,
Mhm.
because it allows me to focus a little bit more on like the reading process, slowing it down, etc. Um, but I will say that since I've gotten, do I have it here? I've gotten a Kindle.
Yeah.
I am obsessed. Does it even work? I don't know. Does it even be? I'm normally technologically better than this.
I have one too. While you're trying to make it load, I have one too, but I use it to play video games.
Oh,
My
there's nothing
friend
wrong with
my friend
that.
bought it for me, so I could, use it for books. I don't. I use it for little,
Well,
video
see,
games and stuff.
I need to desperately charge it. I like it because I can sync it up to my Goodreads
Mhm.
and I can monitor like my progress of reading, and it kind of like attaches numbers to like how much reading I'm accomplishing, and it kind of gives me a little serotonin boost while I'm doing it.
Oh,
So
I love that. I love
yeah.
that. That's cool.
So going through, because everybody's been interactive tonight. Thank you, everyone. I'm super excited. Kaishana says, I have not seen a newspaper being mailed out in my state in a long while.
Yeah,
I
me
haven't
either.
I haven't either.
No.
And then Kaishana says, I don't read print as much because of my vision disability. I do read Braille for music, though.
Oh.
I like to read print all day. Leo says, I don't see printed media ever dying off completely. Physical copies are important to to authenticate, right? And document when paired with digital. Yes, I do agree with that
That
completely.
is a wonderful point, Leo.
Yeah, and
Wonderful.
we'll be kind of touching about that later too, because we're going to be talking about libraries and the importance of
Mhm.
libraries. Um, RP says, I'm down with print or digital.
Mhm.
Just like me, I like both. Kaishana, I even went to a local library today to check out books. I love going to
Oh,
libraries. I have not been to libraries in forever.
as a fellow book addict, love a library visit.
Right. Uh, RP wants to know if they can add you on Facebook.
Oh, absolutely, honey. Send me the link and I probably won't get on tonight, but yeah, send me the link and I'll do the friend thing tomorrow.
Yes. Ari asks, and both Ari and RP ask me if it's a Kindle Unlimited. It's a Kindle Fire. I don't know if it's unlimited or not. I don't know what it means for it to be unlimited. I'm kind of still like since I've gotten it, I've been doing more reading. I've read probably about like 4 or 5 books. I know that doesn't sound like a lot for many of you who read a lot, but for me, considering I spend so much of my time grading, like I just don't have the bandwidth to sit down and read a book all the time, unless it's a poem collection, then I can do that. So, but that's besides the point. Um, so do we think that print has become antiquated, or do we think it's entirely dead? What are your opinions on that, Heather?
I think print is on life support. I don't think it's totally dead. And I agree with what Leo said. I don't think it's ever going to totally go away, especially for, addicts like me. I'm always going to want that book in my hand. And there's always going to be, people who want that connection to a physical book. But I think over time, I think unfortunately there will be a lot more, material that ends up just being totally digital. Like with my books, for example, you can buy physical copies, but I made sure that there are Kindle versions available because there are people out there that want that digital version. In a lot of ways, the digital version, it's almost more instant gratification for reading, which I know sounds funny because you think it would take you the same amount of time, but it's like you always have your cell phone on you, you
Well, and
know?
in reading it on Kindle, it's different because it doesn't focus on page numbers necessarily.
Yeah.
It takes out that equation and it makes it seem like it's moving more quickly. Because I
Yes.
do think that when you're able to see the page numbers, you kind of dwell on them and you get focused on like, well, how much is left of this chapter? At
Right.
least that's what I do when I'm reading
Yep.
anything. So, and Ari was asking whether you have a Kindle Fire since you play games, which is a valid use on it.
Yeah, yes, I do. It's a Kindle. Yep.
Cool.
Mhm.
Cool.
Kindle Fire.
Yeah, so like like honestly, I agree that it's on life support. Um I will say that I think the growth of technology has kind of made print seem a little bit costly, I'll say. And we'll talk a little
Mhm.
bit more here in a minute about
Oh, yeah.
why print is kind of dying a little bit too. But granted, there are people who are very adamant about saying that print is not dying.
Mhm.
And we'll be talking about those perspectives here in just a few minutes too. But personally, I do think that access to technology and the growth of technology has made it more convenient to read, like I was saying earlier, while simultaneously having quicker access to a greater amount of information.
Mhm.
Whereas if you're just reading a newspaper, you are confined by what's just in that newspaper,
Right.
um, or whatever references it makes to prior issues, etc. But if I read like the New York Times on the internet, I can open up another tab, go to Google, and find something that has like I can corroborate a source, or I can look up something completely different, that might apply to that topic. So
Well, and something I think we should say too before we move on is that this idea of print dying it's not a new concept. So it's holding on. It's holding on by even if it's by just its fingertips. I mean, you know, born in the 1980s. So even in the 1980s people were saying that print is dead. So this is nothing new and that was 40 years ago.
well, and hasn't, like, historically speaking, and this is just like a dim memory of information that I have, but I have like this memory that for a long time people thought that like print was dying due to the inventions of like, say, like the printing press as well.
Mhm.
That being like something such a huge invention that it kind of commercialized printing, right? So
Yep.
like people who were like more so connected to like independent writing and printing, like they were like, oh no, this new corporatizing commercializing thing is going to devalue. So really I guess the question is print dying or is it being devalued?
Ooh, that's a good
Right.
point. You know,
If you
mm.
hear meowing in the background, I apologize. My cat Gaby is yowling because he hears me.
Aw, poor kitty.
Gaby,
Um,
be quiet.
well, that'll go on the cut scenes for bloopers.
uh,
Um,
right.
but I don't know, is it being devalued? I think on some level, maybe it is. When I was teaching, I used to have my students reading an article called "Is Google Making Us Stupid?"
Mm-hmm.
And one of the premises of the article was that we skim everything now. Like people don't read. Now, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean they don't know how, but they literally will like skip words and skip full sentences. We're all about speed and getting the gist. If I got the gist, it's good enough. So maybe it is being devalued because we are such a fast-paced, immediate gratification, give me the answer now society.
Right, yeah. Well, and that's a good point, and I'm kind of remembering back, like, and Ari, if you're still here, you can kind of, if you want to chime in in the chat as well on this. We did an episode, was it in season 1 or 2, about like the significance of reading, and we did talk about that as well, like the devaluing centers in the time efficiency that we think goes into reading,
Mhm.
and that in effect translates to what impacts print and our impression of reading print as somehow being associated with slowness, right? Yeah, Ari
Mhm.
says, I think that's in season 1. Yeah. And then Leo makes a great point here, too. It can't die because it would be absolutely ludicrous to make all print digital and no physicality. One bad solar flare or data breach and it's all over. Yes, that's a good
Yeah,
point.
that is
And
a
that's something
wonderful.
that I've thought about too. Like what if it's lost or what if something cataclysmic
Yeah.
happens? Um so um I guess, I mean, if we look at the school of thought that focuses a little bit more on print media dying, I did find an article on Lumavate by Leela Thuma, and she argues that print media is dying because of a number of different variables, and she goes as far as saying that it's dying because consumer behavior is changing, number one. Okay. And her reasoning behind that, and I'm going to quote a few tidbits here, is um, this move to digital isn't only true for consumer purchasing behavior. Digital advertising also has a lot to do with it. Consumers react more so essentially to digital advertising than they do to like physical advertising. Like you don't see a lot of people going into like, what is it called, the classifieds in the newspaper anymore. Is that what it's
Right.
called? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, it's been so
Mhm.
long since I've looked at that. That they don't look at that anymore necessarily for like job postings, advertisements, rental notifications,
Mhm.
houses on the market, etc.
Mhm.
So there's, like I think that the way the consumer has reacted as well has something to do with that. She also argues that brands are going green because it is more environmentally efficient.
Mhm.
Um, we see like a whole bunch of different brands that are going green, and like IKEA, H&M. There are like some that have just completely ditched print already, and others seeing like these larger brands ditching print are following suit because they anticipate that it's going to be like the thing to do,
Mhm.
right? So like we see it happening on those three bases. And cost is another one that I have seen
Mhm.
discussed a lot. Like
Mhm.
um because print focuses and relies on a natural resource and a number of other, resources, like it is more expensive to print than it is to do something digitally.
Mhm.
So,
And I can actually speak to that. I'm an independent author. I use an online publishing thing called KDP that's connected to Amazon. It stands for Kindle Direct Publishing. And whenever I write a book and I use KDP to sell it, when I pick my price for how much I'm going to sell my books for, a lot of that actually goes to the printing. It's not cheap. So if let's say I set my book to be $10, at least $3 of that goes for the printing, for the ink, for the
mhm.
paper, for the covers. Yeah, it's not cheap. And something else that I've noticed too, are we allowed to say brand names on here?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, I am addicted to Barnes& and Noble. Absolutely one of my favorite
Yeah.
stores. In fact, my husband takes me there on date nights. That
Yeah,
tells you
we can
something.
say brand names considering we're not getting paid for anything in doing
Okay.
this. So
I didn't know what
it's
the
a good
whole.
question though.
Yeah. So, we went to Barnes& and Noble the other day, and I noticed that on the front of the building, they have changed their sign. It used to say Barnes& and Noble Booksellers. Now it just says in this brand new modern font, Barnes& and Noble. That's it. So
Hmm.
even Barnes& and Noble, it was about the books. If you actually go into one now, the book sections are still there, but their games, their puzzles, those kinds of things have taken over at least half of the store. So
Hmm.
that is kind of telling to me as a book addict.
Well, yeah. And I bet you a lot of their sales are probably online too.
Mhm.
Like, see, like this is, I guess what we could establish here is that there are a lot more variables than what really meets the eye because
Mhm.
we're also talking about like a consumer market where like people are using or are not using brick and mortar stores and they're doing more online interfaces as well to just purchase.
Mhm.
So not only does that impact print, but also the devaluing of print as well itself.
Yep.
So it's like a double whammy when you think about it. RB, I don't know when my next book signing will be. Probably soon, hopefully. So, let's talk a little bit more about the opposite perspective. So, I did find a couple of articles that talk about the fact that many are arguing that print isn't dying and that it's kind of like something that's overhyped. Because like a lot of people like will fear monger it and be like, "Oh my God, print is dying, the end of the world, rah!" The end of an era. But really, like honestly, what people are saying is, like in this Forbes article painted in a really amusing way, in my opinion. Andrew Meek says, "How about that? Print just might end up being one of the cockroaches lingering amid the nuclear fallout that the pandemic economy has left behind."
It's a
So
cockroach. I love
essentially,
it. I
isn't
love
that
it.
hilarious? So
That's great.
essentially,
I love it.
this article, which is titled "Stop Saying Print Journalism is Dead,"
It's a
what
cockroach. That's
kind of
hilarious.
like overviewed. I know, like when I read it, I was like, oh, slap on the hand. Like, why did I even say it in my title here, right? But um, this person goes as far as overviewing like what new publishers are like starting up new presses and like publications, etc. And like it wavers a bit, but apparently there was an increase during the pandemic, a surprising increase. Um, and people during the pandemic, I think, kind of fell back in love with print media in the sense that it kind of served as an at-home diversion
Mhm.
during like the entire breadth of the pandemic, especially toward the beginning when everybody was, at home, sheltered in place, and etc. So like I never considered that. I did not think about like how the pandemic could potentially impact print kind of uh taking on a new form, but I thought that was really cool.
Well, it kind of makes sense because going back to that Google's making a stupid thing, when we're in our jobs and everything, it's like we have to get that information as quickly as possible. But during the pandemic, we had time to kill. There's a commercial that I'm sure many of you have seen. There's a line in it that says, you know, we're all going to remember a time when everything just went quiet and
Yeah.
still. And the point being that we had time to sit and read for the first time in ages. Because you know what? I don't, you binge watching CSI every single day for a year and a half. You're gonna need something new, It's like you gotta do something different. So yeah, people dusted off their bookshelves and finally cracked open, Moby Dick for the first time and read it.
Ooh,
We had time to do that.
I've read Moby Dick so many times that I'm so burnt out.
I have to admit, okay, I've never read it. However, I have read his other famous book, Billy Budd.
Oh my God,
So
Heather.
yeah,
Oh, Melville has
yeah.
some good stuff that I think kind of gets. But anyway, I took a class in college that just focused on Moby Dick. Well, okay, so the class focused on Herman Melville,
Okay.
but 90% of the class centered around comparing that book to Paradise Lost. So by the end of the
Oh.
semester, I was like, oh,
Oh, what? Oh,
yeah.
wow. I am so sorry, honey.
Yeah, it was
I am
very,
so sorry.
yeah. But anyway, that was a digression for me. But you bring up an interesting point because, and I know like we've talked about this before on the show as well, but the pandemic was almost like a factory reset on the world.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
thinking about like metaphorically comparing it to a factory reset on a computer, right? Because I think what it did was it showed us that our 9 to 5 lives consumed so much of
Oh,
us,
yeah.
you know? Now,
Absolutely.
I am fully admitting the pandemic is horrible. Like, I wish that it had never happened, etc. But I do think that it has allowed us to kind of examine the structure that we have in our
Mhm.
day-to-day lives. And it makes me sad to admit that I think that we wouldn't be having this without the pandemic. We wouldn't be having this like examination of like our lives. Heather, I like, and you did too. We wrote an entire collection of poems
Mhm.
during the pandemic.
Yep.
Ari wrote an entire collection of poems and wrote an autobiographical memoir. I kind of put
That's awesome.
honestly, I wrote my second collection of poems too.
Mhm.
I have had more time to actually do things that are wholesomely rewarding
Mhm.
beyond that of the wholesome reward I get out of work, right?
Mhm.
So like part of me is just so grateful for that. And I'm thinking that based on what we just talked about with that article, like, I think that's part of it though. Like, people realize that how almost detached they've become from like the world around them,
Mhm.
you know? Like, I had a friend describing to me this a while back where like they never really took the time to even go outside and enjoy nature
Oh,
until the pandemic.
yeah. Absolutely.
And to me, that speaks loudly the fact that we definitely need to reassess this like commercialism, right? Like
Yeah.
um this need to like produce because really what it's doing is I mean, we're doing it at our expense because we're not able to feel like we're existing like in this world that we value, right? So
It's funny that you talk about, the poetry and everything. I started a mystery novel at the beginning of the pandemic, and I mean, I was producing chapter upon chapter, like no problem, just kept going. And then I went back to work. And since I've been back to work, I haven't stopped it, and I have every intention of finishing it, and I want to publish it and get it out there for the world to enjoy, but it's taking me forever now because I'm back to producing all day at work. I said reports, paperwork, everything for my job. You don't have the time or the energy to be
well,
creative.
yeah, and honestly, we could do a whole episode about bandwidth, right? About
Oh, yeah.
like the bandwidth that we invest in things, because work does take up very much the same creative bandwidth that we use when we are actually creating.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that has to do with like reading print as well, like
Mhm.
tying it back to our topic. Like when I'm in the middle of a semester reading like a lot of like assignments and papers and emails and stuff, do you think I want to open a book?
Mm,
I sure
yeah.
as hell don't.
Yeah,
Like,
that's why I want a book versus a computer when I read, because I read
right.
on the computer all day.
Well, and see, I think for me, part of my struggle with like reading physical books is that I feel this like urgency to get it all done.
Ah, I see. Okay.
I think a lot of that could also have to do with how we were taught to read when we were
Mhm.
kids too, because reading was, in order to encourage reading, it was made into a competition kind of. At least it was for me when I was a kid.
Ooh, okay.
Because there was like this program called the SRA program. I can't. It standard for like it standard for standardized rating assessment, something like that.
Okay.
But basically, we were placed in color coded levels based on our reading comprehension, and we had to like reach these next levels, and it was like put on display for the entire class.
Oh,
Yeah.
boy. Yeah.
So and I know that especially in like the late 90s and 2000s, like that's something that a lot of kids faced.
Mhm.
And that could have something to, like, again, that could be another variable that might have something to do with how people consume print now.
Could be.
Mind blown
Yeah.
right now. I did not think about that until
Yeah.
now. Heather, have you read Flowers in the Attic?
Yes, I have. A long time ago, though. Long
Same
time.
here. It's been eons for me.
Yeah, and I think like for the series, I think I read all of them. But it was a long time ago. I think I was a teenager when I read them. So, yep, sure have. Yep.
Ooh, RP says my middle school had AR reading or accelerated reading books. That's what it was for me in high school, I think. I think it was accelerated reading. When I was in middle school, it was SRA.
SRA.
Yeah, not a
What
very
about all the acronyms?
I don't know. Like, and
What's an acronym?
here, oh my God, you mentioned acronyms. I'm about to go off on a tangent here. So, so many institutions use acronyms, but don't explain to their audience what they
Thank
stand
you.
for. So,
Thank
like, I
you.
can't stop thinking about, like, why as kids were we being exposed to like these acronyms, but not really taught what they stand for?
Mhm.
You know, what I did get somebody after I mentioned that once, but they were like, "Well, you know what LGBTQ plus stands for, blah blah blah," and I was just like, because I
Well,
was taught what it means and have lived it, so don't even use that as an example. But
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah. That's a non sequitur.
exactly right. So another source that I found also establishes why print magazines aren't dying, and it is from Walsworth, which is still like one of the large like within the top 10 printing printers in the United States and Canada. They have an article by Paige Solomon, which says that trust and digital fatigue keep print alive.
Oh.
Okay. So to me, my understanding was that digital fatigue had a lot to do with people worrying about like what is reliable versus what isn't reliable in digital spaces. Also people worrying about like almost like being overstimulated by access, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Kind of going back to what the article Google making us stupid, right? So, Taylor, hello. We still have 5 minutes left, so you haven't missed it entirely. But like, okay, so it suggests that trust and digital fatigue keep print alive. I almost want to do more research on what digital fatigue means because I feel like there's more to it than what this little blurb in the article establishes. It says that print won't die, especially if print ads don't die. Because apparently,
Mm.
in some spaces, print ads are still very popular. Could have fooled me. But they provide a statistic and say that that 68% of consumers ignore online ads, whereas 82% of Americans say they trust print ads in magazine and when making purchasing decisions.
Okay, personally, I ignore all ads.
Right. I usually
But
ignore all
but
ads as
I
well.
think that is 100% accurate though, because I don't know about you guys, but if I'm on Facebook or if I'm online and the ads are like I use the thesaurus.com all the time for my
Right.
job. There's like kitty litter ads and there's baby ads and all this stuff. I click away, click away, click away, click away.
Right.
I
Well,
find them distracting.
I'm the exact same way as well. I also like when we think about libraries, because I know we wanted to talk about libraries here for a moment
Mhm.
too. Like libraries act as a repository, almost I would argue a reliquary for print materials where people can go in and like feel something and read it. And now don't get me wrong, like there are a lot of libraries that are switching to digital, right?
Mhm.
Um, but like I do think that so long as libraries exist as well, there will always be a demand for print.
Mhm.
100%.
Although I will say this, my office is inside the library at my place of work. And the and the number of books in my place of work gets smaller and smaller all the time. Like the first floor, there are no books at all. 0. Oh wait, no, I take that back. They did add just recently. It used to be on the 3rd floor. They moved to the 1st floor, the more current reading,
Oh, like
no,
contemporary
the
stuff.
contemporary,
Yeah.
yeah, the best-selling stuff, but literally it's like these 3-foot tall bookshelves that are maybe 10 feet long, and that's it. That's all there is. Only books. 2nd floor, 0 books. This is a library, no books. 3rd floor, there is a collection, but it only takes up maybe a third, up to a half of the floor. And
Yeah.
then the 4th floor, even less. There's books, but even less. So the collection gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I worked in this library, and I also went, to this library, before I started working there. And over the years, I've just seen the number of books to shrink and shrink and shrink. They've added a floor, but there's less books.
Mm,
So
it's so sad.
it
Well,
is.
and the thing is, like, when you think of higher education as well, like
Mhm.
these types of surfaces and spaces are some of the first that are affected by budget cuts and shifts,
Oh,
etc.,
oh yeah.
right? So
It
again, like it comes back down to the fact that print media is impacted by so many different variables that it's almost not impossible, but very difficult to track.
Mhm.
you know? So, last question of the evening. How do we as authors feel about this if it is dead or on its way out?
Like I said, earlier, I think on some levels it's a little bit on life support, but I agree with what many people have said in the comments, that I don't think it'll ever totally go away. I really don't. I think it's gonna hang on there. Um, do I think it's going to be as impactful? I think it might make a comeback because,
Mhm.
you mentioned that digital fatigue, and, we definitely need to do more research on that, but if you're just looking at it face value, at some point, people wanna step away from the cell phone and the laptop,
Mhm.
and print is a good place to go for escapes, to have an actual physical
Yes.
book. So, I don't think print is dead. I think it might make a comeback.
I think so too. If terrible fashion trends can come back, print can come back.
Absolutely.
If records can make a comeback,
Yes.
print can come back. Uh, Taylor says, "Radio hasn't gone away, and digital entertainment and music is huge." Like, if those things aren't gonna go away, I don't think print's
Yeah.
gonna go away either.
Brilliant comment, honey. Perfect.
Yes, 100%.
Mhm.
Um, I will admit, you know me, I love digital stuff. I
Mhm.
love operating in online spheres. I love reading online. I love just engagement on social media and online in general. But when I held a book that I wrote for the first time in my hands, I sobbed
Mhm.
because like there is just a visceral tangibility that we experience when we are able to hold something, to touch something, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that's what makes print important. And at the end of the day, I think that's what will always save print. The fact that we will be able to touch it, get a
Mhm.
feel for it, smell the smell of the book.
Mhm.
Like one of my favorite things. Like I love the smell of old books,
Me too.
especially.
Me too.
Like there's just something nostalgic, comforting, and safe about it to
Mhm.
me.
I
So,
agree. That's beautiful, honey.
oh, thank you.
It's beautiful. And, in a world where we are such a throwaway society, we are,
Yeah.
it's one use and pitch it, or even in social media. I mean, I've experienced this in Facebook. If you find a post and like, "Oh my god, I wanna share this with somebody who doesn't have Facebook, I wanna show it to them," you can't find it again.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
At least a book is a legacy, and as a writer, my books are my legacy. And even if they just sit on a shelf someplace and collect dust, I know I wrote those. I am going to leave those behind. Whereas anything I post on Facebook is going to be gone in 10 seconds. It's,
Oh, you gave me goosebumps.
aw, yeah.
My books are my legacy.
Yep.
That hit me because
Aw.
I very much feel the same way. I kind of feel like we, especially for those of us that write, we kind of put
Mhm.
pieces of ourselves in what we write, and they
Mhm.
preserve us in some way. And I know a lot of people who read avidly feel that as well, especially if they get invested in characters or,
Mhm.
whatever it is they're reading. So,
Yeah, and I
ah,
mean, don't get me wrong, investing on social media, that can also, I mean,
oh yeah.
that's also wonderful too. But as a person who, like I said, I like that tangible
But
book
you
in my
can't
hand.
you can't physically hold on to social media, right? Like, don't
Right.
get me wrong, like, on Facebook and especially here on YouTube, I feel that legacy thing.
Oh,
Like,
and you
it's
should. You're
and it,
famous.
like yeah, hardly.
You
But,
are
like
famous.
but it really it makes me feel like I exist in more spaces than just this body, and for
Mhm,
some reason, that comforts me a lot.
mhm.
So whew, we got deep, my friends, didn't we? Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in. It's great to be having these conversations again. And stay tuned because we're going to have 2 more episodes. Mind you, the next couple of episodes are going to be pre-recorded. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, we love you. And if you, of course, have not subscribed to my channel yet, please do. Go subscribe to Heather's YouTube channel. Heather has a YouTube channel titled HM Kanicki. Go subscribe to it. Go follow her stuff. Go buy her books. Let's all support each other. That's why we're all here together, right? All right, everyone, have a good night. Love you and talk to you soon.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.